Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Madison Miller Podcast. I know it's been a very long time since you've heard my voice, but a lot has happened over the past couple of months, so I took a little bit of a hiatus, but I'm back now, and the show is going to be different. I'm not going to do the daily shows anymore. There's just a lot of work. I'll obviously have shows when some breaking news happens, or so we get close to a particular season in a particular sport, or even some pop culture things as well, and some TV. But we're back, and we're going to make it better than ever, and eventually I'm going to have guests on once we get settled in here. So, first things first, today's show is just going to be talking about things that have happened since I've last podcasted. And obviously we got to start with the Super Bowl from last night, where the Eagles resoundingly defeated the two-time champion Chiefs by a score of 40-22. So the Eagles win their first Super Bowl since 2018, their second one over the past decade. Jalen Hurts is a Super Bowl champion. Saquon Barkley's a Super Bowl champion. Nick Sirianni, who was rumored to get fired around Halloween, if not it was earlier than that, rides a ship and gets a Super Bowl ring. But this was all Eagles. First quarter, Jalen Hurts 1-yard rush, 7-0 Eagles after a touchdown by Jahan Dotson got overturned because he was down at the 2. Second quarter, Jake Elliott field goal, 48-yarder, 10-0. And then shortly thereafter, DeJean 38-yard pick six, 17-zip. And then A.J. Brown from Jalen Hurts with 1:35 left and a half made it 24-0. Third quarter, Eagles drive down. Jake Elliott, 29-yard cheap shot, 27-0. Then 46 yards, Jalen Hurts to Devontae Smith, 34-0. And then right before the fourth quarter, Mahomes to Xavier Worthy for 24 yards, 2-point conversion failed. And then he had back-to-back Jake Elliott field goals in the fourth quarter, not even 2 minutes apart. 37-6 and then 40-6. And then 2 garbage time touchdowns for the Chiefs. One from Mahomes to DeAndre Hopkins for 7 yards and a pass to Justin Watson for a 2-point conversion. And then Mahomes to Worthy for 50 yards. And then to Hopkins for the 2-point conversion, as we had a 40-22 final. Jalen Hurts, 17-22, 221 yards, 2 touchdowns and a pick. Patrick Mahomes, 21-32, 257 yards, 3 touchdowns and 2 picks. And ironically enough, both quarterbacks led their teams in rushing. Hurts 11-72 and a touchdown. Mahomes 4 for 25. Saquon Barkley was 25 of 57. His longest was 10. Kenny Pickett actually threw a pass, or attempted a pass in the game, and had 3 yards on the ground. Mahomes played the whole game. Was sacked 6 times. Probably the worst game I've seen him play in his whole career. And then quiet game from Dallas. Goddard 2 for 27. He didn't do much. Kelsey 439. And Mahomes also fumbled too. But it was recovered by the Chiefs. So, awful game for Mahomes. Very good game for Hurts, who got the MVP. Eagles peaked in the NFC title game over Washington, and then obviously here. And they came pretty close to losing to the Rams. They did. And if the Rams beat them, the Rams probably would have won the Super Bowl, if not at least been there. That was one of the what-ifs of the playoffs, and the other one was Baltimore with Mark Andrews with the drop against the Bills. What if they beat Buffalo? Maybe they beat KC and it's Ravens-Eagles in the Super Bowl. So there's a lot of what-ifs of the playoffs as there is each and every year. Okay, so let's do big picture stuff. Eagles, great season, 14-3, deserving Super Bowl champs. They were probably the best team from a talent standpoint. And in the NFL every year, we say it. It only matters by peaking at the right time, and they certainly peaked at the right time. Like I said, Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni have to be looked at differently in terms of respect. They deserve more respect after that Super Bowl because I feel like that combination got criticized throughout this season by their own fan base. Saquon Barkley was the pickup of the offseason. Obviously, the Giants let him walk, and he goes to Philly, and that probably was the difference. Like, if Saquon Barkley's not on the Eagles, they don't win the Super Bowl. I know he wasn't great tonight, or last night, but he was fantastic in the playoff run. They lose against the Rams without him. Dare I say they might lose to the Packers without Saquon Barkley, for crying out loud. Like, say if Saquon was on Houston and Joe Mixon's on Philly instead. Or they keep DeAndre Swift. So that's like a good what if with the Eagles. Like, if Saquon were to stay with the Giants, for that matter, maybe the Giants go from 3 to, 5 wins? It wouldn't have been that drastic of a difference. But if he was on Houston probably beats the Chiefs in the division round if Saquon's on the Texans instead of Joe Mixon. If Saquon's on Cincinnati, they're a playoff team. Maybe they would have been in the Super Bowl if they had Saquon Barkley. But yeah, it turns out that he was the piece that swung the season. I mean, if the Ravens won the Super Bowl, we would be saying that about Derrick Henry, obviously. But Saquon Barkley's just better than Derrick Henry. I've been banging that drum for a while. I know Derrick Henry probably should have been the MVP the year Tennessee was the 1 seed. But he didn't win it because he's not a quarterback. And I don't think people respected Tennessee that year. And that's not on Derrick Henry. It's really just hate from the media. Because I think Derrick Henry was a deserving MVP that year. The Tennessee was the 1 seed. But yeah, if Baltimore was in the Super Bowl or they won it, we'd be talking about Henry as the difference, the swing difference. Heck, if Saquon Barkley was on Dallas, if Dak doesn't get hurt, maybe they're in the Super Bowl. So I think there's so many what-ifs with Saquon Barkley and what if he ended up on different teams. So Jason Kelce, Ewing theory comes through because they won the Super Bowl without Jason Kelce. I know that must have been hard for, not hard for Jason Kelce. I'm sure Jason Kelce was happy that his old team won, but it feels bad for his brother at the same time. We'll get to the Chiefs in a second, but you know how I feel about the Ewing theory. If you remove a very good or great player from a team and you win the next year, or you're a better team without them, well, that happened with Jason Kelce, although Jason Kelce does have a Super Bowl ring. And the Eagles center, Cam Jerkins, actually got hurt in that game the other night. So that's something that I had to bring up. All right, Chiefs. 15-2. But all those lucky one-score games, including against the Bills, and they had the, I think, most ridiculous luck in the league this year, and they got exposed in the Super Bowl against a better team. And we can't treat the Chiefs like a super team anymore. They have to be treated like a regular team now. And I think people would be more willing to bet against them now than they were the last 2 years. Patrick Mahomes, like I said, that was the worst game I ever seen him play. And you got to wonder if the Chiefs' short-term window is closing, if not closed. Because you have the Ravens and Lamar Jackson. You have the Bills and Josh Allen. The Chargers are going to be better with Justin Herbert and Jim Harbaugh. Maybe the Texans bounce back with C.J. Stroud in his third year. You have Joe Burrow and the Bengals going to be back next year. And then there could be some more surprises. Like, could Denver be better? Could a team like Jacksonville be better with their new coach, Liam Cohen, potentially revitalizing Trevor Lawrence? Pittsburgh's always there because of Mike Tomlin, and he's just a mastermind. He's the best coach in the NFL, no doubt, in my mind. So there's some interesting questions with the Chiefs, and I've always was harping on they should have never traded Tyreek Hill trade. But they did for money, and I know they won 2 Super Bowls without him, and the Ewing theory worked without Tyreek Hill. But I was against them trading him because he's an elite number 1 receiver, and they thought they were getting that with DeAndre Hopkins. He turned out to be a flop acquisition. So I'm going to do more in-depth stuff with each team in the off-season and whatnot, like who's be a free agent, who could be trade bait. Like I did it last year, and I correctly predicted a couple of things. So Hopkins is actually going to be a free agent. So is Hollywood Brown. Justin Watson, Juju, DJ Humphries is a backup tackle. Trey Smith at right guard. Kareem Hunt. Tershawn Wharton, Nick Bolton. Derek Nottie. Justin Reed. And then long snapper James Winchester. We're going to go over this more, obviously, on a future show, when I'm going to try to wing the offseason stuff this week, because we're going to get into one story in a couple of minutes that is obviously happening. And then, by the way, the Eagles, Mekhi Becton at right guard. Paris Campbell, that's irrelevant. Milton Williams, Zach Bond, Josh Sweat, Avonte Maddox, and Kenneth Gainwell actually is a free agent too. So they're in a better spot to succeed next year than the Chiefs, and it's not close. Because the Chiefs have a lot of free agents. Eagles have some, but nobody that would be like, oh my God, like the Chiefs do. And then back to the Chiefs for a second. What happens with Travis Kelce? Is he going to retire? Is he going to come back? I think it's going to be the latter because they lost. If they won, I think he would have retired, and who the hell knows, maybe he would have proposed to Taylor Swift. But I think he will be back. Chris Jones is getting older. But they still have Mahomes and Andy Reid. But their division's going to be harder. The Chargers, as I mentioned, are going to be better. The Broncos have what we think is a potential franchise quarterback in Bo Nix. The Raiders have a new coach. And maybe they'll have a different quarterback. Maybe they'll have Aaron Rodgers next year. So, and then Pete Carroll. And he's a great coach. That division has the best coaches in it by a mile. The worst coach in that division is probably Pete Carroll, and he'd be the best coach in the NFC East. Although you might say Nick Sirianni now because of the Super Bowl. He'd be the best coach arguably in the AFC East. But yeah, the worst coach in the AFC West might be the best coach in like 3 other divisions, if not more. That's how good Pete Carroll is. And he'll get the Raiders to play hard. I don't think this is going to be a John Gruden 2.0 situation with the Raiders, by the way. I don't. So the Chiefs, I think, might be in for some trouble next year, potentially. And then the Eagles, like I said, are better successfully, I think, going forward to go back to the Super Bowl. And like I said, not even close. The AFC has better quarterbacks than the NFC. And there's a lot of rebuilding teams in the NFC, including in their own division, in the Giants, who are probably going to have a rookie quarterback in September. The Cowboys are a team in decline. They're going to end up in a rebuild. The Commanders have arrived. They're just in the NFC title game. So I think the only worry about for the Eagles in their own division is the Commanders next year. And then you're going to have Green Bay, who is usually there. We'll see about Minnesota. I want to talk about them on their own show, but they have a good coach and a good roster. Detroit, that was a bad playoff loss they had against the Commanders. And I think that they'll still be a decent team, but you could argue they might have missed their window because they should have beaten the Niners in the NFC title game last season, and then they get their asses kicked against the Commanders on a Saturday night at home. Then you have the Rams, who they're talking about Cooper Kupp being traded, but Cooper Kupp is still very good. But they have Puka Nacua. He's better than Cooper Kupp right now. He is. So, I do think Cooper Kupp in some ways is expendable, but if I'm the Rams, I keep him. But they still have Sean McVay and Matthew Stafford, so that's important for them. So they'll be around. Who knows with the 49ers? They have some issues. Who knows about Seattle? Who knows about Arizona? The Saints are hiring Kellen Moore, it looks like. But they're in a bad situation. Atlanta, who knows with Cousins and Penix. Carolina, I think, is a team on the come. That might be the next year's Commanders. If I had to randomly pick a team, it's either them or New England. New England with Drake May or Carolina with Bryce Young. Because Bryce Young really was good in the second half of the season. I think he silenced a lot of doubters in the second half, and I think Carolina has themselves a franchise guy. And now I think potentially that Young versus Stroud conversation will actually be picking up. Nothing against C.J. Stroud. This is because of the emergence of Bryce Young. Nothing against C.J. Stroud at all. Oh, and the Chicago Bears. I forgot to even mention them. Who hire Ben Johnson away from the Lions. And you would think Caleb Williams might be better next year. So, I do think the AFC is the stronger conference, but I was just throwing out some NFC possibilities that could be a little better than expected from an Eagles, who's going to challenge the Eagles kind of standpoint. So it's going to be an interesting offseason, and we're going to talk about every team within the next couple of weeks. And oh, by the way, I did pick the Eagles to win the game, and I had Saquon for MVP. So I got my MVP pick wrong, but I got the winner correct. I correctly predicted Chiefs and Eagles in the championship round, division round. I thought the Commanders had a shot at the upset, but I didn't think they'd actually do it. I actually had them covering the spread. And then the other 3 teams I did have advancing. And then the first round, I had Houston. I had Baltimore, Buffalo, Philly, Washington, and I picked Minnesota over the Rams. But the Rams obviously played inspired with the whole wildfires in California situation. That game was in Arizona. and the Rams really played their hearts out that night. And Minnesota just wasn't prepared, and Sam Darnold looked like a pumpkin in that game and in the Week 18 game at Detroit, where Detroit won the division. All right, so that's football. We did a good 20 minutes on football. And the most shocking trade in the history of the NBA happened technically a week before the Super Bowl, but it got reported late Saturday night around, I want to say, a little after midnight Eastern time. And Luka Doncic got traded to the Los Angeles Lakers. It was stunning. I literally shared the tweet and said, wait, what the fuck? Like, that's how shocked I was. Shams broke the news at 12:12 a.m. on, it was February 1st into February 2nd. It was technically February 2nd, but it was the night of February 1st. So, yeah, it was Doncic, Kleba, and Markieff Morris to the Lakers for Anthony Davis, Max Christie, and a 2029 first-round pick. And then Utah was in the deal as well. And Jalen Hood, Shafino went to Utah in the trade. But I literally was shocked. This is the most shocked I've ever been over a transaction in the history of sports. I was going to do an emergency podcast that night, but I couldn't believe it. Like, my first instinct was, did Shams get hacked? And then he follows it up. It's actually his pinned tweet right now. And he follows it up with, yes, this is real. So, on real trade, I think the Lakers really set themselves up for now and in the future with this trade. They didn't give up a lot, and they got a top 3, if not 5 player in the league. He goes, yes, this is real, at 12:16 a.m. And then the Jazz, yeah, Jalen Hood, Shafino, 2025 Clippers second, 2025 Mavs second. But I had to stare at it for a couple seconds to make sure it actually said Luka Doncic. And it did. I could not believe it. I still can't believe it. And I think Nico Harrison should be fired for this trade. This is a horrible trade for Dallas. And they're making themselves out to be like AD, Kyrie, and Clay are their big three. What is this, 2016? You're living in the fucking past with this trade. Jesus. All injury-prone guys who, they're all in their prime still right now, but not for long. They're all freaking injury-prone, and they're all getting older. But the Lakers hit a grand slam with this trade. And now they have a future without LeBron James down the road with Luka, and they could just build a team around him. They're the Lakers. And then they were had an agreement of a trade placed for Mark Williams, but that fell through because he failed his physical. And that would have been another steal of a trade for the Lakers, but that, like I said, that fell through. But I do think there was more to the Luka Dallas situation. He didn't request a trade, apparently. I think there's a chance he did, even though they're reporting that they said he didn't. Anthony Davis, him getting traded wasn't a shock, but for Luka Doncic, holy fucking shit. Like, my head is still spinning over this trade. And this, like I said, biggest shocking trade in NBA history. It kind of dominated Super Bowl week, which was a loss for the NFL. And I think that how the Super Bowl played out, I do think that the Mavs are a little bit off the hook because everybody's crapping on the Chiefs. But yeah, unreal. And I think the Lakers are a real contender to win the title this year. I think they're the second best team in the West behind OKC. I'm not that big of a fan of Denver because I think that they're a little top-heavy with Jokic, Murray, and that group, and I think the loss of KCP could hurt them in the playoffs in the long run. The Suns have been a disappointment. The Clippers have been a nice surprise, but I think there's a chance they miss the playoffs. And then the other big trade that happened, the next day, the Kings trade De'Aaron Fox to the Spurs, and Jordan McLaughlin goes to the Spurs. The Kings get Zach LaVine, Sidi Sissoko, 2025 Charlotte pick, 2027 Spurs pick, 2031 Minnesota pick, and 3 second-round picks, 2025 Chicago, 2028 Denver, and then 2028 their own pick. And the Bulls get Zach Collins, Trey Jones, Kevin Huerter in their own 2025 pick via the Spurs. So, this is a great trade for San Antonio. They needed to make a somewhat of a go-for-it trade because they recognize they have this special talent in Victor Wembanyama, who is a top 5 player already in the game. In my opinion, the most untradeable player in the league. He was number 1 in Bill Simmons' trade value for a reason. Zach LaVine was having a good season for Chicago. But I don't love this trade for the Bulls either. I think they could have gotten more for Zach LaVine, but the reason why they did it is because of how Zach LaVine's viewed around the NBA. And I thought the Kings got a nice haul for Fox. I think a lot of people think it's a bad haul, but that Minnesota pick's good. They have Charlotte's pick. And then they got a Spurs pick in 27, which is a not a good pick. So, and I think that Charlotte trade, or Charlotte pick might have protections on it. But I think it's a better trade for Sacramento than given credit for. And they could do stuff in the summer. De'Aaron Fox on San Antonio with Wemby, I think makes them a scary team in the West. Not just for the rest of the regular season, but if they make the playoffs, say if they make the play-in and win, they're going to be a scary round 1 opponent for somebody if they make it with Wemby and Fox. And the Bulls, I think, are the loser in this trade because I don't think they got enough for LaVine. And I like Kevin Huerter. He's good, but he's not. Oh my God, they got Kevin Huerter. And listen, I liked the Josh Giddey trade when they made it. And I think that they might win that trade down the road because he is a good asset. But he's just not putting up good scoring numbers, but his all-around game is pretty good. So, yeah, that's the full trade with the Spurs and the Kings and the Bulls. But, obviously, Luka going to the Lakers is the Grand Slam trade that sends shockwaves around the NBA, changes the NBA landscape. And really, of course, it was the Lakers. And the other thing with the Mavs, why didn't they have an auction with other teams? He could have gotten traded to San Antonio for 8 first-round picks, Stephon Castle, and Devin Vassell. I know that would have been a lot of picks to give up. But the Mavericks should have just blown it up and rebuilt if they were the deal Luka, instead of being a fake title contender, which they're pretty much what the Lakers were before the Lakers made the trade. But the difference there is that LeBron James is still better than Anthony Davis, Kyrie Irving, and Klay Thompson. And LeBron was freaking awesome the night they made the Luka trade against the Knicks at MSG. And LeBron is also past his prime, but he's a more dangerous player than those other guys, amazingly enough. Even though he's past his peak, he still plays better than all those guys, which is crazy. And I think it says a lot about how LeBron keeps himself in shape and whatnot. So it looks like Luka's making his Lakers debut on Friday. Oh no, it's tonight! And it's going to be on TV, which is awesome. So, I didn't realize that it was actually tonight. So, I didn't think he was back this quick, but here we are. So, the football story that I wanted to talk about in this show was the New York Football Jets. It was reported on Super Bowl Sunday by Jay Glazer that the Jets met with Aaron Rodgers to talk about his future. And he was only told that the team was moving on from him. If that means he will be a June 1st designation, that allows him to sign with any team in the league on March 12th if he decides to continue to play. Given that Aaron made an effort to fly back to discuss his future, all signs point to him continuing to play. It just won't be for the Jets. So, I think the Jets are making a mistake. They don't have a high enough draft pick to draft a quarterback. They are an older team with a lot of talent, although they do have some young talent too. They have a new coach in Aaron Glenn, who they hired from the Lions. And of course they hired him because he used to play for the team. And the Jets hired everybody under the sun. Even Rex Ryan they interviewed, but they don't want to live in the past anymore. But I think it's a short-term mistake by the Jets, because I still think on the right team, Aaron Rodgers could have something left. And it was obviously a year after the injury, too, which got to factor that in. Because usually that first year after an Achilles injury isn't great. Just ask Kevin Durant. And then he was awesome the year after he came back. But Durant still played well that year, but not amazing. But I think the Jets are just blaming Rodgers for a disaster of a season. Their defense got worse after they fired Robert Saleh. And I think the Jets front office, and they fired Joe Douglas too, the Jets organization overrated their defense. And they decided to point the finger at the old quarterback who has history of causing drama and blamed him for their defense being bad or the real reasons why they were bad. But I don't think Aaron Rodgers was the main reason why they were bad. I thought they were bad because their defense was just an overrated unit and they had bad coaching. I think Aaron Rodgers, with the right coach, a good offensive line, and a good defense, could be good. Still. I think there are a lot of suitors for Aaron Rodgers. I think that the Raiders are obviously one of them with Pete Carroll. I think that the Steelers would be an interesting option for him with Mike Tomlin. I think the Browns are going to be in play for Aaron Rodgers, amazingly enough, with Deshaun Watson missing next year as well because of the setback in his recovery. And that would be such a Browns move to bring in Aaron Rodgers. Although the Browns have a good coach in Kevin Stefanski and a good line. But that would just be so LOL Browns to bring in Aaron Rodgers. I don't think the Giants are going there because they have a top 3 pick and I think they want to take a quarterback. Or maybe they trade up to 1 with Tennessee. That's another story that came out on Super Bowl Sunday. Tennessee trading the number 1 pick as a possibility. I think that would be a mistake by Tennessee. But again, that's another story for another day. We're talking about Aaron Rodgers here. So I think the most logical destination is Vegas with Pete Carroll. And then that division's going to have Mahomes, Herbert, Rodgers, and Bo Nix. And then the dark horse could be San Francisco if they decide not to pay Brock Purdy. So I'm interested to see where Aaron lands and what the Jets do at quarterback. I think the Jets might go for their old quarterback, Sam Darnold, who they drafted number 3 overall in the 2018 draft, who had the best year of his life in Minnesota. But I think whoever signs him needs to be wary and don't overpay him like the Giants did with Daniel Jones, in which murdered their franchise. And you just don't want that to happen. So where the Jets go from here is interesting. I think Sam Darnold's an option. Maybe they decide to blow it up and rebuild and start Tyrod Taylor and then go from Arch Manning next year. So I think the Jets do have some interesting options. I do not think they should tank. They do have talent. I think that would be an interesting Sam Darnold destination. I think that could be a Kirk Cousins destination if Atlanta moves on for him. Andy Dalton wouldn't be bad for the Jets. He's serviceable and can win you games. I mean, Nick Foles won a Super Bowl, for crying out loud. So, I mean, anybody can win a Super Bowl. You just need good quarterback play, not necessarily an elite quarterback. Just ask Nick Foles. I'm going to keep bringing that up. But that doesn't happen often where a quarterback that's not great wins a Super Bowl. I mean, washed up Peyton Manning, but then again, it was Peyton Manning, so that's a different element, and he actually was good in that Super Bowl. So I'm interested to see what happens with the Jets too. Baseball, there was a lot that happened. Juan Soto's a Met. Max Fried's on the Yankees. Alex Bregman's still a free agent. And the Dodgers just keep reloading and reloading as well. And they almost, did they almost get Juan Soto? I know they landed somebody big in the winter, and we were all like, whoa. Roki Sasaki, that's who it was. And then they signed Blake Snell. But yeah, they got a lot of people on their team. And so, they're going to be awesome. Once we get closer to baseball, I'm going to do more podcasts about baseball and who I like. But the Dodgers are the team to beat. And it's not even close. Atlanta will be better with Acuna coming back. The Phillies will be there with their rotation and Bryce Harper. The Cubs should be better in year 2 with Craig Counsell. Who knows with the Cardinals? There was talk about them blowing it up and rebuilding, but they really haven't done anything. On the American League, I think... the Mets signed Juan Soto, so they're going to be pretty good too. On the flip side, the American League, it looks like the Yankees are still the team to beat. Although, I do think there could be better competition than you would expect, and injuries happen, and they still have an injury-prone kind of roster. Like, Aaron Judge isn't always healthy. Giancarlo Stanton isn't always healthy. Max Fried has an injury history. Garrett Cole had some lingering injuries last year, too. And he missed the first couple months of the season, and they still won the AL East. Well, that's because they got hot in the last months of the season, and they passed Baltimore, and Baltimore just fell apart. Then they lost to the Tigers, obviously. Baltimore's going to be there. The Red Sox, a lot of people think are going to be better. The Tigers, I think, are going to improve, and they have Tariq Skubal, and they signed Jack Flaherty. So it's going to be an interesting baseball season. The White Sox are going to be bad, obviously. The Twins can be better. The Guardians might take a step back because they feel like an every other year kind of team. And then the Royals are going to be good. The Astros, they might lose Bregman. They're not going to be as good, although you never know with them. Then you have the Athletics, who made some moves to try to improve. The Angels stink. I'm surprised Mike Trout's still there. Seattle, maybe. And then the Rangers should be better. So I think the Yankees do have some competition in the American League. And I do think that the Mets, with Juan Soto, and they bring back Pete Alonso as well, are going to be awesome. And that division is loaded, except for, obviously, Washington and Miami. But that big three is a big three with the Mets, the Phillies, and the Braves. And any of those three can win that division. We talked a little basketball. Luka getting dealt and Darren Fox getting dealt. The Cavs obviously cooled off after their hot start, but they're probably still going to be the 1 seed. It's going to be Celtics and Knicks 2nd and 3rd. The Celtics beat the Knicks the other night, and Brian Scalabrine went off and said they're the most overrated brand in sports. I think that was stupid. I think that the Sixers, it's going to be interesting to see whether they make it or not. With Embiid being in and out of the lineup, Paul George hasn't really panned out. Maxey was hurt. So Nick Nurse and Daryl Morey both might be fired in the spring. The Pistons have been a pleasant surprise this year. Indiana's Indiana. Miami traded Jimmy Butler. We didn't even bring that up. And they get Andrew Wiggins back pretty much. And Golden State, I think, is better short-term with Jimmy Butler, with Steph and Draymond. We'll talk about the West in a second. Atlanta's been disappointing. Milwaukee turned their season around after a bad start, so you got to give Doc Rivers credit for that. They trade Chris Middleton away to the Wizards for Kyle Kuzma, but we'll see how that works out. Charlotte stinks, as we know, and they I think it's going to end up working out potentially that Mark Williams trade's going to happen because he's good. He's really freaking good. And then in the West, in the East, we forgot about Orlando. They're going to be good down the road and for the rest of this year, although they dealt with so many injuries this year, which is unfortunate for them. And then the West, like I said, I think the Lakers are now the second best team with Luka. I think the Mavericks are a team that is a little overrated without Luka. They have good players, but they're never healthy and have injury history. Although I got to give Kyrie credit for being healthy this year. And pretty much healthy as a Maverick, period. But we know the history there. The Spurs are on the come. I think they have a chance to make the play-in. The Clippers, I'm skeptical because Harden's pretty much carried them the whole way. Norm Powell's had a career year. They have a good coach in Ty Lue. And Jeff Van Gundy, by the way, is an assistant for them. He's going to have a head coaching job next year. I just don't know which team that is going to be. We also have Golden State with Jimmy Butler and Draymond. I mean, Steph isn't the Steph of old, but he's still Stephen Curry. And he still could single-handedly carry a team like we see with LeBron and the Lakers. The fact that they didn't give up Jonathan Kuminga in the Butler trade, I think is a win for Golden State. Phoenix has been a disappointment this year. Kevin Durant's not going to be on the Suns next year. There's too many trade talks, and a lot of people were speculating that he was going to go to Golden State, but apparently he didn't want to go back there because him and Draymond are not on good terms. But that was probably happening, and then that would have sent Jimmy Butler to the Suns, and that would have just been a bad trade for Phoenix. But Phoenix is probably blowing it up and rebuilding in the summer. And one of those guys might be on the Spurs next year with Wemby and De'Aaron Fox. And then you have the Kings, who are kind of rebuilding now. But we'll see if they continue the rebuild kind of and blow it up. Because they're kind of playing half pregnant right now because you have Sabonis, you have Zach LaVine, you have DeRozan, but you trade away Fox and get a lot of picks. Or maybe do they spin the other way and try to get another point guard that could be available? Or maybe they get Devin Booker and try to be good next year. So there's ways that they can go about it, so maybe I shouldn't be calling them half pregnant. OKC's the best team in the league, period, end of story. Like, I've been harping that drum for a long time. And they should be the favorites to win the title. Denver, like I said earlier, I don't think they're deep enough. Portland's on the rise. I think they're a long-term team. The Rockets are good. The Rockets and the Grizzlies are two teams that are way better than I expected this season. Memphis is because of the return of John Morant and the leap of Jaren Jackson Jr. who made the All-Star team this year. And Houston is because they have a good coach in Ime Udoka, and that young core has come together. And Amen Thompson has been an absolute stud for the Rockets. And he's in the starting lineup now, and now he's a franchise player. And he might be a guy you can build a championship contender around. Maybe he's the new Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, because I don't think we thought about Shai Gilgeous-Alexander like that. And when he became the man, look what happened. So that's my comp for Amen Thompson. We'll see what they do with Jalen Green and Alperen Sengun. But yeah, that's a summer team. That might be trade a lot of pieces and get the big piece kind of team. But the question is, who's going to be the big piece? Could that be a Booker team? But Booker and Amen Thompson play the same position. And Fred VanVleet really hasn't been that great of a free agent pickup. He It's kind of been a ball hog in crunch time and stuff, and been taking bad shots. But I do like the Rockets, though. They are a respectable and fun watch this year. And obviously the Jazz stink. Minnesota's been a huge disappointment after trading away Karl Anthony Towns. Turns out the Knicks really won that trade in a landslide. But Julius Randle's just been a bad fit there. So we'll see what happens with Minnesota. And then hockey. Hockey's interesting. Their trade deadline's coming up. The Rangers, I think, made an inexplicable freaking trade, getting JT Miller from Vancouver. I don't like the deal for the Rangers, only because I feel that they should have made that kind of trade in the summer. And that's obviously coming from a Rangers fan, but the team's been disappointing this year, and their GM, Chris Drury, that was obviously a Hail Mary kind of trade because he knows he's in trouble. And obviously Peter Laviolette's job is in jeopardy too. And this is the most disappointing Rangers season I can remember in a while, especially coming off of the conference finals appearance and winning the President's Trophy the year prior. So, very disappointing season for them, and then they go and get JT Miller. JT Miller's actually been good for them so far, but I just don't think that trade's worth it in a year where you're bad. I'm sorry. That trade should have happened in the summer, and if that trade happened in the summer, the Rangers would probably be in the top 3 in their division. So, I don't like that deal for them, and I don't really like it for Vancouver either, who obviously is trying to reshuffle things themselves as they are in the second wild card right now. Like, I think that trade's a mistake for Vancouver too. Like, you're in the second freaking wild card and you trade one of your best players away. I know he's perceived to be a locker room cancer and stuff, and sell back Elias Pettersson. I get all that, but I would have kept JT Miller, kept that group together. And I think that the Rangers made a mistake in that trade too. Get it, the Rangers are still in the mix. They're 3 back of Detroit. Columbus has been a pleasant surprise this year. So is Ottawa. But the Rangers could jump both those teams. And Boston's been a disappointment too this season. But they just have played more games than the Rangers. And they have 60 points compared to the Rangers' 58. But yeah, Boston and the Rangers to me have been 2 big disappointments. The Islanders have been disappointing. Pittsburgh needs to blow it up and rebuild. I've been saying that for a while. Florida's still really good. The Capitals have been a pleasant surprise with 80 points, 36, 11, and 8. And they're going to run away with the Metropolitan Division. New Jersey's in 3rd comfortably. Carolina's in 2nd, so that could flip-flop. Florida's in 1st in the other division. Then Toronto, Tampa. That's a given. That feels like the top 3 in that division every year. Oh, and then the Red Wings are finally relevant. That's another team that Boston and the Rangers could potentially leapfrog. So, I'm not calling the Rangers or Boston done by any stretch of the imagination because of the lack of experience of Ottawa, Detroit, and Columbus, and the pedigree of the other 2 teams. But if anything, I want to know what their Stanley Cup odds are, Boston's and the Rangers. Because that could be like the random 8 seed, or in this case, second wild card that could make a run. Like the Kings did in 2012. The Winnipeg Jets got off to that great start this season. They have the most points at 81. Dallas, Minnesota, 2nd, 3rd. Edmonton and Vegas are tied for 1st in the Pacific, which is no surprise to anybody. And then the Kings are in 3rd. And then Vancouver's 4th. And that could flip. So, I think Calgary's only 3 back of Vancouver. But yeah, Nashville's been a monster disappointment. They've been more disappointing than the Rangers because Nashville brought in all those free agents and they've just flopped. Their coach is probably going to get fired. If I'm Barry Trotz, do you next year step down from GM and coach and do what Lou Lamoriello used to do with the Devils. And by the way, how does Lou Lamoriello still have a job? The Islanders have been disappointing in his tenure. I can't believe that guy still has a job. And the Islanders are very known for dysfunction. So, we'll see what happens there. And then the college sports we'll get into on another show, as well as reality TV. Maybe we'll do that tomorrow or Wednesday, but I want to start the NFL offseason stuff this week as well. So, hope you guys enjoyed my return podcast, guys.